The way I like to eat is really focused around creating and maintaining the type of physique that I've personally found to be the most optimal to the disciplines that I want to be able to perform. And this is by no means a perfect diet or me suggesting to you something that you should be doing. It's just basically a breakdown of what I've been doing and the things that are working for me currently. This video is going to be mainly focused upon the philosophy behind why I choose to eat this way, as well as like a bit of a brief overview of how I consume my meals throughout the day and things like that. It's a metaphor that has been used pretty extensively, but a good way to describe this philosophy would be like that of a high-performance vehicle. The demands that are placed on it are far higher than that of a normal vehicle, so it has to be specifically treated and maintained. Similarly, I put my body through physical stress on a regular basis, and so the same goes accordingly. Things like sleeping adequately, maintaining mobility, and of course a nutrition plan that suits the outcome of which you're aiming. And this leads me to my next point, which is it's critical to be very clear upon the goal of which you're aiming, so that you know the things that you need to do to achieve it. Pretty simple. So for the sake of ease, we'll call this our North Star. In business, the North Star means pretty much the company's purpose, so that they know the best ROI actions to be done to achieve it. But the metaphor works really well here too. Now for me, these fall into two main areas. Number one is being in an optimal place physically to perform the way I want as a martial artist. And that's keeping my body conditioned to a level where it's light and agile, while having a level of strength to be able to deliver power adequately. And these also connect into many other beneficial areas of performance, such as speed, explosiveness, and cardiovascular capacity. Number two is to promote longevity. I want to be able to make the maximum use of my body for as long as I'm capable. I want to be able to train forever, so I try to take as good care of myself as possible using the modalities that I'm able to influence. And when I talk about knowing your outcome, it might sound like common sense, but if you look around most gyms, there's always a big contradiction in the rationale of most people's methods and the behaviour that ensues. So for instance, somebody might state that they wish to improve their skills in martial arts, but at the same time they don't want to let go of their bodybuilding training, for instance, and adopt something that would be more beneficial to improving martial arts. And you can certainly take this approach if you want and become a kind of jack of all trades, and many people do like this approach, but we only have a finite amount of energy, and when you do focus on lots of different things, this is where your energy goes. You make progress outwardly, so you expend your energy and make a little bit of progress in lots of things, whereas if you remove the majority of these things and just focus on one or very few areas, your progress becomes exponential. And it's really ridding yourself of the most trivial things and focusing upon the essentials to reach the goal that you're after. And what I found for me is to keep things really simple. As you probably well know, gimmicky diet fads overwhelmingly promise magic pill solutions, so I would recommend finding something that works for you personally. And even though there's a lot of really confusing information out there, there's really no secret to nutrition, and most people who are kind of doing anything related to any kind of performance of the body tend to eat really similar things if you do your research. But it's easy to see why people think so when you come across articles like this. Of course, Ronaldo is in good shape, but he just eats healthy and trains. There's not really any magic or secret. And I've tried many different things out, but what I've found works best is that I found a selection of foods and dishes that I really like and basically pretty much eat the same thing every single day. And if you pretty much hate what you're eating, but you're doing it to achieve a certain result, then long term that's not going to work. So I think it's vital to enjoy what you're eating so it can be sustainable for you going forwards.
Bland, greasy, no seasoning. Fish is dreadful.
I also follow practices that you've most likely heard before, like eating foods that are as close to their natural source as possible and not eating anything too overly processed. I also don't really like to put on too many condiments and sauces and things like that. I find just sticking to herbs and spices to be pretty much sufficient. And I also don't really consume empty calories like sodas and other beverages that just have high calories and lots of sugar and things like that in them. And this isn't for everyone, but one thing I do every day is track and weigh everything that I eat to make sure that it fits my macronutrient breakdown. Now this may sound like a bit of an odd thing to do after I just said in the previous statement that I pretty much eat the same foods every day, but for me it's more like an exercise in discipline and a kind of trick of the mind. And when I do this, it has multiple benefits. So one is obviously ensuring that I'm consuming the macros I want, which I know produces a certain look and feel to my physique, but more importantly than that, it gives me the feeling of being kind of on track and being on top of things. And being more kind of like the person that I envision myself to be, my kind of best self, if that makes sense. Now, we don't have control of many areas of our life. A lot of things are out of our control, but nutrition is one area that you can control, so I like to take advantage of that. And in doing this, it also has knock-on effects to other areas of life, like, knowing that you can set a target, stick to something, and achieve a result at the end, which I think is really important. I feel this is why training in general, and for me the martial arts, mirrors life in so many ways and carries principles that can be applied in so many other areas. So my height is 5'7" and my weight is around 140 pounds right now, and I'm quite lean at this weight, which is more a personal preference for me. But going back to that performance car analogy, they don't really contain any unnecessary luxuries because they are made for a purpose. And similarly, I don't really like to have any excess weight on my frame. And we know that having extra, baggage, you could call it, leads to things like insulin resistance, inflammation, and numerous other negative effects. So I like to try and keep my body weight relatively low and not fluctuate too much, which can be managed through tracking. And just on a side note, looking back at Ronaldo again, he apparently plans to lose a kilogram, just over 2 pounds of weight per year in order to maintain or extend his career. And this is also something that I've noticed about Zlatan Ibrahimovic as well, is that recently he seems to really have trimmed his weight down, and he's still playing at the highest level at age 38, which is incredibly rare for that sport. So there's clearly something in this about obviously having a lighter weight or trimming your weight back and it being less stressful on the body long term. So a general overview of how I do things as well as what I eat is the following. The first thing I'll do upon waking up is have a black coffee followed by a huge load of water throughout the morning, and sometimes I'll chop a lemon into this water as well. Fasting has been found to have longevity benefits because of its effects on things like autophagy, which is the body's way of removing damaged cells. So autophagy literally means to self-eat. And in Dr. David Sinclair's book Lifespan, he cites that it was initially thought that simple caloric restriction was what caused the increase in life of test subjects, but it was later discovered that similar effects could be gained using fasting, which he explains in layman terms as kind of turning on your longevity genes. And before I eat anything most days, I'll do some kind of fasted circuit training for about half an hour total. And this is purely for maintaining a level of conditioning for me, but also many of the movements use the whole body, so it lends itself well to martial arts training as opposed to some other training methods that simply train you to be adaptive on one plane of movement. The level to which I train here isn't quite the intensity of HIIT, but it's definitely challenging enough to do what I need it to do while avoiding overstressing my body and nervous system so much that it would take away from my main goal of being a better martial artist. And this is something that I've built up to over time, and I wouldn't recommend to just jump in with a similar workload to what I'm accustomed to. Sinclair also states in his book that intense exercise that leaves you breathless is also the best promoter of longevity. So you can see how here once again there's many of the things that I'm doing have dual functions, so killing two birds with one stone if you will. And I don't follow a strict fasting and eating window. There's a few different ones like the 12-12, with the most popular one being the 16-hour fast and 8-hour eating window. But I generally tend to eat my first meal around 1 PM, which is eggs and spinach with sourdough toast. I choose sourdough toast because it's known to be better for digestion, and some other breads can lead to bloating and things like that. A little bit later on, I'll have yogurt with some various ingredients such as berries and protein powder. And with the lockdown currently occurring, the way I train has changed a bit from being able to visit the gym. So in the evening at the minute, I'll usually just train some techniques and do some stretching, whereas before I'd usually have my main session in the evening, which would vary between training alone at my local gym or with friends somewhere else. And this has changed how I eat a little in the afternoon as well, because when I would train with friends, for instance, I would have eaten something more beforehand, as the sessions were usually over a couple of hours and pretty intense, but now I'll just have some fruit or something else light and then a larger meal again after I train. After this training session, I tend to have a really big meal that contains salmon, rice or pasta, green vegetables, avocado, lentils and some other vegetables if I have them lying around. Then finally I'll have some kind of mid-evening snack, which will be like sourdough toast again with peanut butter and banana, or sweet potato and avocado, and anything else that I may need to make up my calories. So I know that might sound pretty simple, but that's what I've kind of found works best for me. And before I started taking training really seriously, I just used to kind of eat whatever, but I've definitely noticed improvements and way more benefits since really dialing things in like this. And if I've been training particularly hard over a period of time, I'll notice maybe a dip in energy and a spike in hunger. And when this happens, I may decide to have a day where I eat at least 1,000 extra calories, mainly from low GI carb sources. And that kind of sorts me out and makes me feel pretty good. Other than that, I tend to not really have that much else, unless I'm going out to kind of a restaurant or something like that. But if I'm going somewhere, I'll tend to prepare something beforehand and take it with me so that I don't really have to eat anything too overly processed. And once every now and then, I'll have a cheat meal or, a few cheat meals or something like that. I used to have like a full day of doing this where I'd have a full kind of cheat day, but I found that the next day, it like severely wrecked my mood and made me really kind of like agitated and cranky and stuff. So I try to limit it and not go too overboard with that anymore. And as mentioned previously, I'm not telling you this is like the optimal diet. I think you should do your own research and learn what may work for you and try different things so you can find it out. That's what I did, and it's not only really good fun, but I think it's a really important skill to know, like I think nutrition should actually be taught in schools. Most people have kind of no clue what they're putting into their bodies, and what they think is healthy is actually really often unhealthy. And worse than that, they're obviously giving those foods to their families and things like that as well. So learning some information about nutrition, even basic knowledge about how to read food labels and things, I think is super important. Remember to head to my channel as well, youtube.com/GrantStevensMA. I will be getting around to making other content on there as well. I know I keep talking about it, but I've had quite a lot of different things on at the minute, so it's trying to find time to prioritize doing that, as well as these videos and other things I've got going on. So I will be doing that, and also subscribe to my other social media channels like Instagram. I post videos on there, different workouts and things I'm doing. You can follow through with those as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.